Hello and welcome to Antinatalism this week. Before we go ahead, I just want to say sorry that the sound quality of this video is not going to be good. And there are two reasons for that. One is I got a very severe throat infection this week. I think I got hold of a very pronatalist virus who just cannot stop reproducing, unfortunately. Because of that, I had a lot of pain swallowing and speaking. So that is one reason. The another reason, as you can see, I've lost my regular microphone, which I use to record these videos. Well, not lost in the sense lost, but I had to send it to repair. So that's another reason. So apologies for this. And not only the sound quality is going to be bad, but the levels of sound are going to be up and down a little bit. So sorry about that. But anyway, we have a lot of news to cover from all around the world this time. We have news from America, from the UK, we have updates from Finland, Norway, Poland, India, and further beyond. So let's have a look at those updates. Valentine's Day happened this week, and Sumit from BengaliAntinatalists group had a great idea. He did an outreach of antinatalism. Here you can see he's standing with Stop Having Kids placards in an area where a lot of young people have gathered together to celebrate Valentine's Day. So, absolutely fantastic idea. And that reminded me of the fact that this year, coincidentally, Valentine's Day was on the same day as Ash Wednesday. Ash Wednesday in the Catholic religion is the day when you give up something that you like for the period of Lent. This would have been made a good theme for outreach that give up the idea of having children while also celebrate Valentine's Day. So the theme would have been, make love but not babies. But anyway, whatever Sumit has done here is absolutely fantastic, and all kudos to him for doing this outreach. Harper's Magazine is one of the oldest magazines in the United States. In fact, it says on here on Wikipedia page of Harper's Magazine that it was started in 1850 and it is the oldest continuously published monthly magazine in the United States of America. The circulation numbers are more than 100,000, which is quite big. These are the numbers from 2018. At any rate, this looks like a very big mainstream magazine in United States. Why am I talking about this? Because the news is there is going to be a long, comprehensive, in-depth article about antinatalism in this magazine sometime next week. I don't know if it is going to be co-authored by Amanda and Matti, or only by Amanda, or only by Matti, but that is the news I have. So looking forward to read this. Now, this magazine is not free. You have to buy subscription for it, but they allow two articles to read for free every month. So don't open the magazine yet. I will provide the link in the next week's update when the article is in, and then we can have a look at the article. A new online shop, a Polish online shop by TNSA has been opened. The website is tnsa.myspreadshop.pl. Now, TNSA, I think, is some kind of a publishing house. It has published a lot of academic material, including that of antinatalism, including translation of David Benatar's Better Never to Have Been. And they have opened this an online shop selling antinatalism themed merchandise. As you can see, I'm just browsing through the products here, t-shirts and bags and all. These are all antinatalism themed, and if you're interested, it's a Polish site. If you're interested, you can go and buy those products. In the About Us section, it says Stanislav Andreski Scientific Society. That is what the group is, and they are composed of researchers, artists, students, and individuals who work in research areas in science and I guess philosophy, and they have made this available. Amanda has made a video about this. I'll put a link of that video in the description as well. Helsingin Sanomat is one of the very big, or probably one of the biggest newspapers in Finland. Helsinki is the capital of Finland, and that is where this newspaper is located. I looked up the distribution numbers in Wikipedia of this newspaper, and it is really big mainstream newspapers. They have published an article on antinatalism on Matti Häyry's view of antinatalism with the title Humanity the End Already. Now, the title might be a little ambiguous, but it might be lost in translation too. The original title was written in Finnish language and I got it translated into English. In the article, Matti says that he does not want to tell other people what to do, but he wants other people to listen to the arguments of antinatalism. What are those arguments? They talk about Benatar's asymmetry between bad and good, and the article says that there is more bad than good in life is the asymmetry. But we know that that is not the actual axiological asymmetry of David Benatar, and I'm sure Matti also knows about this. So maybe this is another point where it got lost into translation. At any rate, they mention the argument of asymmetry. They also talk about the argument of optimism bias. We all don't necessarily feel that we are harmed by being brought into existence, but that is because we have some biases like existence bias and optimism bias. Optimism bias is studied in detail by David Benatar and Better Never to Have Been, and that is what they talk about in the article. Matti also brings up the consent argument, that nobody has consented to be brought here. And finally, the risk argument. Now, the thing with risk argument is that we usually think that risk argument is the risks of life that we impose upon the child which we are going to bring into existence. And that is true. David Benatar has called this as a game of Russian roulette, that we are gambling with somebody else's life. But the risk argument, the depth of risk argument goes beyond just the immediate child. So, for example, if we bring a child into existence, we have a child, and there is a chance that that child in turn would have more children. So, there are different risks of life, and not all risks would be realized in any one particular life. But serious risks or risks of serious harms would eventually be realized if we consider this infinite chain of child having children, they having children in turn. And it's basic mathematics that the probability of realization of risk, of any particular risk, given an infinite chain of generations, would tend to approach to 1. That is basic mathematics. So that is the depth of risk argument. It is beyond just the immediate child that you're going to have. And the article touches upon this point. So then the question comes that the benefits of life, or pleasures of life, are they justified when we count these probabilities, these risks, and the chances of them getting realized? That is the question Amanda and Matti ask in the new book that they're going to publish in April 2024, according to this article. So very much looking forward to that book. The article then goes on into the journey of Matti overall. Like, he started his philosophical career in 80s. At one point he wanted to have children. Not only just wanted to have children, but he actually wanted to have twins, one boy and a girl. And from that point, he has gone to completely antinatalist position. He got himself vasectomized at the age of 30. He is now 67. They also talk about negative utilitarianism. Negative utilitarianism is the concept that we should prioritize minimizing suffering, reduction, elimination, and prevention of suffering, as compared to the priority of increasing or maximizing happiness. And that makes sense. Minimization of suffering should be the priority. I mean, compare these two scenarios. You're given a choice of having a garden near your house and having a hospital near your house. Which is more important, having a hospital or having a garden? And I think most people would say having a hospital, because suffering is more important, or at least minimization of suffering is more important as compared to increasing happiness. That is negative utilitarianism. Now, Matti cautions about the boundaries of negative utilitarianism. He says that we should not go all the way to just reduce the suffering. There are some concerns. Specifically, he says that autonomy of other people should not be crossed when we think in negative utilitarianism perspective to reduce the suffering. So that's a very good point he brings up. They also talk about inclusion of animals in antinatalism, and we know that Matti is a sentiocentric antinatalist, although he has some reservations in terms of intervening in wildlife to stop procreation of wild animals. But overall, he sides on to sentiocentric antinatalism. One point they talk about is population, that, population reduction, what should be the population, these things. And Matti says that population debate is completely different than antinatalism. The reason he says that is that people who debate about population debates in general, are about sustainability. They want a sustainable human population on Earth. They want Earth to sustain for humans to be here. Whereas antinatalists want Earth without any humans or without any sentient beings.
So they are, in fact, if we look at this way, completely opposite ideas. One wants humans in a sustained manner. Another one does not want any sentient beings or humans, depending on your flavor of antinatalism. So I agree with this that, from this perspective, population debate is completely different than antinatalism. But there are some overlaps also. So antinatalists, at least the Benatarian antinatalists, would want a population of zero if we're talking about humans on this earth. And if you're talking about sentient beings, then zero sentient beings. A population of zero is what we want. In fact, the sixth chapter of Better Never to Have Been talks about extinction, but at the same time, it also talks about population ethics. It tries to solve many problems in population ethics. It refers to a lot of literature by other philosophers like Derek Parfit and so on, who were specializing in population ethics. So while at the one time, I think one side, I think that yeah, it's a different thing. In fact, organizations like Population Balance, for example, have alienated themselves from antinatalists. They say that we are not pro-natalists, but we are not antinatalists either. We are about population balance, and we are about autonomy and people's choices and so on, reproductive choices. So from that perspective, population debate is completely different than antinatalism. But on the other hand, there are overlaps, there are concerns. There is one more concern that Benatar has said in one of his papers, that antinatalism, ethical antinatalism, in this sense, we talk about suffering of the child we are going to bring up and so on. But the policies of governments and societies in terms of fertility rates and birth rates can be called as antinatalist policies, in the same way that when the policies are there to promote birth rates and for people to have more children, we call them as pro-natalist policies. So if there's a policy to reduce birth rate, we might as well call it as antinatalist policies, is what David Benatar has said. So yeah, there are some overlaps. Sometimes it's a different concern, and Matti sides on the side that yeah, population debate is completely different than antinatalism. Nonetheless, overall article, very nice article, very interesting article, many different interesting points made in the article. Although I must emphasize that some things might be lost in the translation. I got it translated from Finnish to English. And the big deal is it is presented in such a big mainstream newspaper. So huge congratulations to Matti, and also thanks to Amanda Suknik for informing me about this.
So, of course, there had to be some response to that article now. As you can see, this Kansa Lenin, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing this, but this is another media house, which is a right-wing conservative media house, I'm told. And they have published a response article to Matti Häyry's antinatalism article. The heading itself starts on a dubious note. It says, Helsingin Sanomat spreads view that hope for destruction of humanity. And I want you to focus on the term destruction here because they do this all over the article. That is a theme of this article. I've marked some of the sentences in here. It says, the magazine spreads the thought process that wishes for destruction of all sentient beings. Then it says the article encourages humanity to destroy itself by not having children. It also says antinatalists want you to consider whether everything that feels pain should be destroyed in the world. Now, this is a deliberate use of an ambiguous term, destroy here. Let me clarify. Antinatalism and in even Matti Häyry's antinatalism is not asking for destruction of existing beings, whether it is existing sentient beings in general or existing humans. What it is asking, the antinatalism is asking is to not create new life, new sentient life or new human beings, which is different than destroying existing beings. Destruction of existing beings would involve killing them and their annihilation. That is not what antinatalism is asking anywhere. Whether on the internet you can look up or Matti Häyry's article you can look up in Helsinki Sanomat. Nowhere have they said that we should kill ourselves. There were references to thought experiments about red button and all, but those were thought experiments to evaluate our own intuitions. Matti Häyry has categorically said that he would oppose any practical implementation of red button. And no antinatalists are for killing existing sentient beings. We are only for not creating new sentient beings or new human lives. So, this usage of the term destruction, destroy humanity, destruction of all sentient life, seems to be a deliberate, dishonest attempt to color antinatalists with some sort of, like they're terrorism, they're bad guys, they're evils, and so on. That's one. The other point is that while describing Matti Häyry, it says that he himself is childless, which is true, unlike his own parents. And what they're trying to do here, the subtext is that the well-refuted argument that, if your parents had thought like you are thinking, you would not have existed, and that is a bad thing. Whereas antinatalists would say that if my parents had thought like me, I would not have existed, and that is not a bad thing. That is the whole point, because we recognize that coming into sentient existence causes harm to the being who comes into existence. So it is not a bad thing. Anyway, the rest of the article is in the same, has the same snotty theme to it. Again, antinatalism, which hopes for destruction of all living things. Again, same ambiguity, destruction of everyone. It also refers to Matti's and Amanda's interview on non-toxic, which we had covered in a few in antinatalism this week, a few episodes ago. So this, and see, the it's what very short article, no depth, no arguments provided, just complaining with some wrong logic, really. Anyway, that's the way it is. I mean, most of the pro-natalist articles are like that, unfortunately. So yeah, that was the response. One of the responses, I guess there would be more, to the article of Matti Häyry on Helsingin Sanomat. There was an article in Le Monde, that's the French, some sort of newspaper, media house. I don't know exactly, but yeah, that's French. And this is a translated article with the headline that French men are increasingly turning to vasectomy. And I'll tell you why this is significant, but let's first have a look at the numbers it says. It says that a number of men opting for this form of contraception, that is vasectomy, has risen from 1940 in 2010 to 30,000 in 2022. That is a very big jump in a matter of 12 years. Like from 1,000 or maybe 2,000 to 30,000 men having vasectomy. I don't know what's going on in France, but whatever is going on is very good, very nice. Speaking of that, the significance of this is this. A few days ago, Emmanuel Macron declared that we need to do demographic armament. That is his term, demographic armament. He is worried that birth rates of France are falling and there's going to be a population crisis, a demographic crisis. Usually this sort of propaganda is heard from right-wing people like Viktor Orban, Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, North Korea's Kim Jong-un, and so on. But the difference here is that France, Emmanuel Macron is the president of France, and he is left wing. He is the left of the political side. And he is saying that we need to have demographic armament, which was surprising and worrying. But the good news in the face of that is that French men are well aware of what they need to do. Very nice article. Although I could not read the full article, it was behind the paywall, but still good news. There was a new episode of the Exploring Antinatalism podcast, 82nd episode, and this was the first time Amanda Suknik was having an in-person interview. This time she was interviewing Ryan Showler. Ryan Showler is the translator of the book On the Tragic by Peter Wissel-Zapfer, and Ryan Showler himself is a very learned philosopher. Ryan has studied German and French as other languages than his native English language. Surprisingly, he does not speak Norwegian, and the book on the tragic, which is translating, is originally in Norwegian, so he can only read and write Norwegian. Now, translation of this book is not an easy task. First of all, translation itself is not an easy task. And to translate this philosophical work of such a standard as Zapfer is absolutely difficult task. So huge congratulations to Ryan for doing this. There have been many failed attempts at this translation in the past, but this is probably the first time anybody has successfully been able to do it. In the interview, they talk about aspects of course, antinatalism, some objections to antinatalism, some objections to David Benatar's asymmetry. Then they also talk about the relationship, philosophical relationship of Schopenhauer and Zappa. They also talk about Schopenhauer versus Hegel. They were philosophers at the same time, and Schopenhauer did not like Hegel. They talk about why, what were the differences, and why Schopenhauer did not like Hegel. And they also talk about Schopenhauer and antinatalism in general. Soren Kierkegaard, I think, was a Danish philosopher, and they talk about his antinatalism and his influence on Zappa. They also talk about how they came to know each other, Amanda and Ryan, and this is quite an interesting anecdote. I want to take an analogy here. So we have an organ in the throat called larynx, which is kind of a sound box. It is somewhere here, I think. Now it has to be controlled by our brain, so there has to be a nerve traveling from our brain to this larynx. But the way it does is it starts from our brain, it doesn't directly go here. It starts from the brain, it goes in our chest, goes from under one of the arteries to the heart, and then comes here to the larynx, connects to the larynx to connect to control it. In giraffes, it's even more pronounced. So if you see here, so if you follow my mouse cursor here, this is a picture of giraffe. This is a brain of giraffe. A black line starts from the brain of the giraffe. It goes all the way down up to its heart, goes from underneath one of the arteries, feeding to a giraffe's heart, and then starts coming up all the way to its throat. So even though the larynx and brain are separated by maybe a few inches, but it has to travel so many feet all the way to its heart and then come back. Why this is so? The reasons are in evolutionary biology. But the point is that this is analogous to the way Ryan and Amanda got connected to each other. So what happened was that Ryan was translating this book of Zappa, and there are many fans of Zappa. One of them is Tim Osekas. He is a nurse in Australia, an antinatalist, of course, and he came to know that Ryan Showler is doing translation, so he got in touch with him. And then he told this to Amanda. And Amanda then tried to get in touch with Ryan. And then they realized that Amanda and Ryan actually are only a couple of blocks away. So they're literally living maybe a few buildings away, a couple of buildings away from each other in the same city, of course. But they got connected through somebody who is sitting in Australia. So quite an interesting anecdote here. They also talk about Andrea Nielsen Moss, who is another Zapfa fan and Zapfa scholar. He's sort of an authority on Zapfa literature. He lives in Norway and in the same town as Zapfa used to live. They mention that. Then they talk about Last Messiah. Last Messiah is another essay by Zapfa, and it was written. Zapfa has had worked on this essay and the book for a period of time which overlapped. So he started working on both of these things in 1930. Last Messiah was published in 1933, and On the Tragic was published in 1941. So Zappa at some point worked on both of these things together. That's one thing. Then they talk about the four coping mechanisms which Zappa has said that people use to against this all meaninglessness of life. That is distraction, isolation, anchoring, and sublimation. They talk about relationship of this last Messiah and on the tragic, and then they talk about Zaffar's views on different aspects. Zaffar's views on extinction, Zaffar's views on negative utilitarianism, whether Zaffar was sentiocentric or anthropocentric, Zaffar's views on suicide and right to die. Finally, Ryan mentions that David Benatar is one of the official reviewers of the book. So, what that means is that when a publisher is going to publish a book written by some author, they appoint some different reviewers who are expert in the related field. And in this case, David Benatar is one of the official reviewers of the book, which is absolutely great news. They also talk about some of the statements by David Benatar and Thomas Ligotti in the book. Ryan is working on future translations of Zaffa. He's already done two-thirds translations of a play on Jesus by Zaffa. There is a biography of Jesus he wants to translate, and some other works of Zaffa he wants to translate as future projects. Along with that, he mentions Playful Schopenhauer, which is working on as a side project. Now, Playful Schopenhauer sounds like an oxymoronic statement, but that's what it is. And if you want to know more about it, go and listen to the interview. The due date of this book, On the Tragic, is 30th of March this year, and Amanda has provided all the links of how to pre-order and all that in the links in the description of that interview. Enormous work, 3 hours interview, in-person interview. So thank you, Amanda, for doing this. And of course, Thank you, Ryan, for doing all this effort, this enormous mammoth job of translating such a difficult piece of literature and philosophy. Thank you very much. In the last episode of Antinatalism this week, we talked about a talk which was going to be given by Dr. Émile P. Torres on 13th of February. That happened. The topic was We Are All Going to Die, and the recording of that has been uploaded on this YouTube channel called Post Human Research Institute. It was a very good talk. For the first 40 minutes or so, MLP Torres talked about the ideas mentioned in his book on human extinction. Then there was a short critique of the book by Trevor Norris. And then there was a Q&A section, a comprehensive Q&A section, very interesting Q&A section. One interesting point in that Q&A part was that MLP Torres mentioned that there have been some turning points in the history, human history, which has shattered our human arrogance towards rest of the universe. So the first one, for example, was Copernican revolution. Before that, we thought that this Earth, this planet that we live on, is the center of the universe. And that was all shattered. We are no more in the center of the universe. Things are, going around in their own merry ways, and we are just part of, small speck of dust in that large universe. That was one. The another one was Darwinian revolution, where we gave a lot of importance to humans, ourselves as a species, and rest of the species were like utilities for us, and they were lower to us. Darwinian thought actually shattered that belief, and now we are on the same level as rest of the species. We are part of the nature, and we have evolved in the same manner as other species have been evolving. In the same line, Dr. MLP Torres says that this recognition that humans can be extinct is another moment shattering human arrogance, because then you recognize that the universe can go on, it is completely indifferent. We seem to be giving far more importance to humans than what they deserve. Human extinction can happen, and the universe wouldn't even care. So that was one interesting point. Overall, very good video, very good session. And I would like to, of course, thank Dr. Emil P. Torres for doing this work, and also Christian Daigle and Trevor Norris for organizing this. It is uploaded again on the channel Post Human Research Institute. Of course, I'll provide the link in the description. Talking of extinction, Let's Unite, who is the founder of Voluntary Human Extinction Movement, WEMT, or they also have a website called wempt.org. They now have a billboard in Portland, Oregon, on one of the highways there. As you can see on the screen, the billboard says that think before you co-create more of us. May we live long and die out. And you can see Let's Unite here on the screen. So absolutely fantastic news. Now, this WEMT Voluntary Human Extinction Movement is antinatalist movement, but their antinatalism is slightly different than sentiocentric antinatalism, which would include all other species, whereas voluntary human extinction movement is for extinction only of human beings. Nonetheless, it is still a good news because they are still opposing having new children, bringing new children into existence. And now they have a billboard. Les tweets that this billboard is a shared billboard in the sense of every 60 seconds, for 10 seconds, people will see this message, and for rest of the 50 seconds, some other advertisements will be shown. Now, this I'm told as by Les is on some kind of intersection, so there would still be time for people to see this when they stop for the traffic signal. So good news overall. And along with that, Les Unite was also interviewed on one of the YouTube channels recently. Now that was not this week, I think I missed it. It was a few weeks ago. The interview was on the channel Barstool Chicago, and here you can see Les Unite answering the questions. You can get a sense of what WEMT is, why, what's the motivation of voluntary human extinction movement, and also how friendly Let's Unite is, as opposed to the image of evil created by the likes of Elon Musk and everybody else about Let's Unite and people who are of extinctionist opinion in general. Anyway, that was an interview of Let's Unite, and that was a billboard Let's Unite has put up. The Human Predicament, which is a book by David Benatar, an audio book of that is already available since last 1 year, since February 2023, on Google Play Books. That's the audiobook that you can see on the screen. It's almost 7 hours long, and it can be purchased for whatever price you see on the screen. So that is not the update. The news is the first 41 minutes of that book are available as a preview for free. It was just uploaded last week on Google Play Books, and you can hear the first 41 minutes. It's quite nice, and If reading books is not your thing, listening to them is what you prefer, have a look at the preview and then you can decide to purchase the audiobook. A while back, in one of the episodes of Antinatalism this week, we had shown photos of book distribution events that Sumit and his group Bengali Antinatalists had been organizing in Bengal, distributing book about antinatalism in Bengali language. They have done it for 5 days. They did it on one of the largest literary book festivals in the world. Sumit says that about 2.9 million people attended the festival. So the more people, the merrier, ironically, even for antinatalism advocacy. And Lawrence has done a fantastic job of interviewing Sumit, especially about this event. They talk about how they did the distribution, what sort of book it was, what other leaflets they distributed, and many other details in the interview that we can see on the screen. Antinatalist Advocacy Podcast, hosted by John Williams, comes up with these podcasts periodically. This week, it was an interview with Ash Wickety, who is vegan, animal rights activist, and an antinatalist. And the topic was why not eat animals. Of course, this is heavily discussed topic in antinatalism circles because of the overlaps between antinatalism and veganism and human-centric antinatalism and sentiocentric antinatalism and so on. So many different aspects about animals and veganism were discussed in congruence with antinatalism. So overall, a very interesting episode. Now, what I also want to say is that before this episode, there was episode 7 last month, I think, and it was interview with Benedictine the Truth. That's the name of the channel, I think. And that person actually has his own channel, Benedictine the Truth. He's also vegan and an antinatalist, and he uploads very interesting long videos, philosophical videos with a nice greenery, nice natural background, somewhere in South Africa, I presume, and I should start updating about his videos also sometime soon. So yeah, Antinatalist Advocacy Podcast, always interesting to hear these topics. And thank you for John Williams for doing this and hosting this and having Ash Wickety this week. Deccan Herald is one of the mainstream media houses in India, and you would think it's a good news that if they have written an article about antinatalism there, and that's what has happened. There was an article called "Married, Child-Free, and Happy." That's the title of the article in Deccan Herald. It is written by somebody called C.K. Meena, who is the writer herself, and she is also child-free herself. This is C.K. Meena here, and she says she's 66 years old. She is child-free herself. She has never had any inclination to have children. The article starts generally with child-free aspects and child-free concerns, how people are generally society's pro-natalists and women are pressurized to have children, and so on. But the main point which I want to focus about this article is the section where it talks about antinatalism. So there is a subsection here which is called "Herd of Antinatalists?" question mark. And I thought, oh wow, okay, they're going to talk about antinatalism. So let's have a look at what they say. It starts with by saying that a few of my peers are child free and the reasons for their choice vary widely. So that's still child free. One thinks kids are a nuisance. Now, that is definitely not antinatalism. Another had early health issues and was glad not to conceive thereafter. Still not antinatalism of sorts. I would say this is still child free reasons. So inflexible was a male colleague's decision that he had a vasectomy before marrying. Now, this is just a fact that he had vasectomy. I don't know if that person's reasons were child-free reasons or antinatalist reasons. Anyway, let's move on further. Gen Z appears to have different motivations for its child-free options. The overwhelming one is, not surprisingly, we don't want to strain the planet's resources. Others range from being too expensive to raise a child to the rising crime rate. Now, this is the first paragraph about antinatalism in this article. It does not nowhere it mentions anything about ethical, the core antinatalism. And I sort of sympathize with the sentiment expressed by Lawrence in one of his videos that it is unfortunate that environmentalism or the environmental strain of antinatalism is clubbed together with general antinatalism. Environmentalism really, what they say here is that we don't want to strain the planet's resources. That is environmentalism. That is not the actual core ethical antinatalism. There are many different why we should not have children, why procreation causes harm, and so on. Environmentalism is not one of those core reasons. What we can say is that there are main core reasons why antinatalism is right, and environmentalism might be a benefit, a byproduct of the core antinatalism. A similar analogy can be drawn in terms of veganism. So, main idea for veganism is rooted in animal rights, the suffering that animals have to go through, which are raised in factory farms or otherwise, and then they're slaughtered. All of that is causing suffering and harm to those animals. Those are the main reasons for being vegan. So, along with that, you reduce your carbon footprint or it is healthy. These are byproducts, these are extra benefits of being vegan. I would say that even if a certain vegan diet is environmentally costly than a meat counterpart, and you can make the case like that in certain local situations, even then, vegan diet or plant-based diet is more ethical than animal-based diet. So there are plant-based benefits to veganism, but they are not main reasons for veganism. Similarly, there might be environmental benefits to not having children, but those are not the main reasons why one should not have children. So it's unfortunate that they confuse these things. Anyway, let's move on. Bengaluru-based writer P, some anonymous writer, child-free and in her 30s, enlightened me, C.K. Meena, about ultra-radical worldwide trends that are seeping into India as well. Ultra-radical worldwide trends are not the words you would want to use for the ideas that you yourselves believe in. I did not know that there was an antinatalist convention in Malleshwaram in 2019. I didn't know either until this point, so I don't know what happened there. I hadn't heard of voluntary human extinction movement and its founder Les Unite, who had coined the slogan "Thank you for not breeding." Yes, voluntary human extinction movement is some kind of antinatalist movement, but it only focuses on human and extinction and not on. It's different from sentiocentric antinatalism, but this sort of is correct. I had not heard about aphilism, the belief that entire animal kingdom should perish because it destroys the planet. This sentence is wrong on so many levels. I don't want to sound rude, but I also want to point out the mistakes in this sentence. First of all, what do you mean by entire animal kingdom should perish? Perish generally means dying, which, when you apply it in this way, it would mean killing. Antinatalism is not for killing existing life, whether it be human beings or other animals or any sentient beings. That is point number one. Antinatalism is only against creating new sentient beings or creating new human beings. It's point number one. Point number two, perishing of animal kingdom. Let us say that we take the meaning of this as that all of the animals disappear from this planet Earth. What exactly are we saving by disappearance of those animals as per this sentence? Because it says animal kingdom should perish because it destroys the planet. Well, the planet is just a rocky planet which is going to keep on going around the sun, whether the animal kingdom is on its surface or not. So, what do you mean by planet? If you mean the biosphere on this rocky planet, then if the animal kingdom itself is not there, then what biosphere are we talking? Just plants? So, this sentence does not even make any sense. So, let me clarify in very clear terms. Antinatalism or sentiocentric antinatalism is opposition to creation of new sentient beings, whether it be humans or any other animals, irrespective of species, any being who will have capacity to suffer. Antinatalism says that it is wrong to create such a being. It is not about perishing or dying off or killing existing beings. And antinatalism on a species level or on a level of kingdom or phylum or genus is slightly different than pro-extinctionism. There are overlaps between the two, but they are different concepts. Antinatalism is only talking about not creating new sentient beings. Extinction might be a consequence of that, or antinatalism might be a means to achieve extinction, but these are two different concepts. It seems to me, by reading this article, that this writer has not done even the basic research of what antinatalism means. And that is unfortunate because this would have been such a golden opportunity to write about antinatalism in such a mainstream media house, which now has been lost. So I feel very disappointed reading this article about antinatalism. Then it says, Or about antinatalists who say it is unethical to bring a baby into the world without its consent. There is one sentence to one argument amongst many for antinatalism. So, very superficial sort of touch on antinatalism. I think antinatalism is way deeper than what this article has given justice to. That's one. This article does not mention David Benatar. It does not mention his asymmetry. It does not mention suffering. If you don't like David Benatar, it does not mention Julio Cabrera. It does not mention any of the antinatalist arguments at all, except this one sentence talking, just touching on consent. There is asymmetry, there are optimism biases, there are risk arguments, there is, of course, consent argument, Julio Cabrera's manipulation argument. There are so many arguments through which you can approach antinatalism. You can have disagreements between these arguments. None of that is done. So I feel really bad that this article was printed in this mainstream Deccan Herald. Sorry to say that. Paul Morland is a demographer, and he seems to be in the same line as Stephen Shaw, the creator of the documentary The Birth Gap. Paul Morland, this is an interview of Paul Morland, as you can see on this screen, and they are they are worried that there's going to be a population collapse. Not enough countries are having not enough children, mainly developed countries, whereas countries like African countries are having population explosion. So they are going to be run over by these different people they don't want to be run over by. That seems to be the theme of what this interview was. Again, this is a recurring theme of pro-natalist demographers, talking about population collapse and demographic collapse. What they are really worried about, and they say this in Paul Morland says this in this interview, is the question is not that the birth rates are decreasing. The question is who is having more children and who is having less children. So has some underlying eugenistic tone, although they don't dare to say that explicitly. But yeah, completely pro-natalist interview, unfortunately. One point to note is look at the title, The Narcissistic Death Cult of the Woke Left. Now, I don't want to go into woke versus wokeism and left and right and all that is politics. But the narcissistic death cult, they are implicitly referring to antinatalists here, although the people they are complaining about, the people who don't usually have children, who because of which the birth rates are going down in many of the countries, these people are not, the reasons for them not to have children are actually not ethical antinatalist reasons. Or generally they are not. They are mainly around, the financial costs and the inflation and the situation and child freedom and career and this and that. So that's different than ethical antinatalism, but still they are referring the general antinatalist cult, if you want to call them. First, they're calling it cult. Second, they're calling it death cult. And third, they're calling them narcissist. Now, antinatalism has been called as death cult. It is not a death cult. Antinatalism is not promoting death. It is promoting not creating new life. I mean, I almost say this in almost every episode, maybe sometimes more than once. But anyway, that's the unfortunate situation. Secondly, antinatalists are not narcissists in the sense that their nice narcissism does not go in the realm of it being a narcissist disorder. Everybody is a narcissist. Everybody has narcissist needs. Everybody loves themselves. Some self-love is always there. But the fact is that people who have children, the parents who have biological children, are the people, if you ask them why do you want to have children, their reasons generally point to satisfaction of their narcissist desires. And I'm also not claiming that their narcissism is going into narcissistic disorder, but the reasons point to satisfaction of their narcissistic desires, their own desires. They have somebody to love themselves and so on. So, if anything, it is pronatalists who are more narcissistic than antinatalists. So this narcissistic death cult is complete misnomer when applied to antinatalism. Rest of the interview is same old stuff, fear mongering of demographic crisis and so on. I won't go into that. I can make a complete different whole dedicated response video to it, but I just wanted to give an update that this interview was published this week. Finally, a news about Nikhil Kamath. Nikhil Kamath is an Indian entrepreneur. His worth is, I think, 1.1 billion US dollars. He started a company called Zerodha, which was a stock brokering firm. It is a stock brokering firm, and it was one of the disruptors in the brokerage industries. So very successful capitalist, very successful businessman. So you would think that, capitalist, businessman, all of that, what has that to do with antinatalism? He has put up a clip on Instagram talking about why he does not want to have children. His reasons probably are not antinatalist reasons, but still, the point he makes is about legacy. Such a rich person, many people would think that, he should have children at least for, leaving legacy of his business and so on. And he talks about how meaningless the concept of legacy is. And this is very important because a lot of people have children thinking about legacy, thinking about lineage, their lineage, the family name, and all those things. And this very successful businessman is just destroying those ideas. I'm going to put up a link at the end of this video. I'm taking a risk of copyright here. So if you don't see that clip, assume that I had to remove it because of copyright issues. Thank you.
Think you'll ever be a parent? There's also partly why I don't have kids. I'm like, I'm going to ruin 18, 20 years of my life babysitting this child, and then, luck serves me right. I've been lucky for long enough. The reverse will happen at some point. So you want say, screw you at 18 and leave anywhere. So you want the Kamath legacy to end with you? I think the notion of legacy in itself is... Seriously? Really? I feel like we all think we are more important than we actually are. You're born, you die like every other animal on the planet, and you're gone. Nobody remembers anybody. How does it matter? Beyond your time, what people think of you, how does it matter to you? Do you never feel like, hey, I want to be a parent? Like randomly, once in a while, you'll feel like it, no? I feel like that is vanity to think that I want to be remembered 50 years after I'm born. Nobody will be remembered. Like no king is remembered, no like demigod figure is remembered. And what is the point of being remembered? I feel like you should come, you should live well, you should be nice to the people you meet in your life, not after you're dead and how you interact with posthumous legacy.